And joining us tonight is Zach Schonfeld, staff writer covering courts and politics for our media partners at The Hill. He was actually one of the very few journalists inside the courtroom. Zach, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
So the proceeding lasted less than an hour. Talk to us about the tone, what it was like in that room, especially between the judge and the former president.
Well, in many respects, the former president went through the same steps that any other defendant would when they go through the federal court system here in D.C., whether it be the hundreds of January 6th defendants that we've already seen charged since the Capitol riot, or any other defendant who has been going through the court system for decades. Trump had his rights read to him, was asked by the judge if he understood those various rights and understood his right to remain silent, to have attorneys or one appointed for him. So in terms of the actual proceeding itself, it really followed the same methodical steps that happens in this courthouse all the time, almost on a daily basis, if not more. So in that respect, it was very normal. On the other hand, of course, this defendant is anything but normal. He had a large security detail with him in the courtroom. So certainly, although the script was a normal arraignment as any else, what it was like in the atmosphere in that room certainly felt very different.
And talk to us about Trump's demeanor. I mean, you had a front row seat to all of this. How did he interact with his lawyers, and did he avoid the special counsel and prosecutors there?
So when the former president entered the room, the special counsel was already seated in the room. Once Trump entered, he took his seat with two lawyers at his side, Todd Blanche and John Lauro. And then Trump and his two lawyers sat there for about 24 minutes waiting for the judge to arrive. So a pretty decent length of time. During about that 25-minute period, the former president was talking with his lawyers, was going through documents in front of them. And also at some points, I saw him even cracking some jokes with one of his attorneys. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but both of them were laughing at one point. In terms of the interactions between the two sides, the special counsel's office and the former president, there honestly wasn't a whole lot of interaction. At times, I saw the special counsel glancing over in the former president's direction, but for a lot of the proceeding, he was looking straight ahead, and the former president really didn't look much over to the special counsel and the prosecution side.
Yeah, and you were one of, I believe, 100 people in that courtroom, including 3 officers who responded to the January 6th Capitol riots. What was the reaction like among those observing, just taking this all in?
Well, there were honestly a lot of different groups that got seats in that courtroom. So first of all, what was a quite unusual occurrence is we actually saw multiple sitting federal judges who serve in this courthouse and have overseen, by the way, past January 6th cases. They came and sat in for his arraignment in the back row. Also inside that courtroom were law clerks and other staff members who work at the court, members of the magistrate judge's family, the judge who was presiding over the proceeding, about a dozen or so reporters, and also 5 lucky members of the public. I was told by the folks who got a seat in the room, they took the first 5 in line. I asked them what time they had shown up. They had all shown up before dawn the Thursday morning. And one had even told me that he was paid to be a line sitter for the Associated Press. He was relieved that morning and then decided to get in line for himself to get a spot in the courtroom, and he ended up being successful.
Yeah, I can't miss history, right? So, Zach, what's so fascinating, too, about your experience and perspective is you were at the first indictment in New York. What were some of the similarities and differences between the first one and now the third indictment?
Well, as I was saying before, in terms of the arraignment itself, although that New York arraignment was in state court, this one was in federal court, that ends up causing just some small little differences in terms of the steps that the judge goes through. In terms of the basics procedures, it was largely the same that we saw in New York. The former president spoke few words to the judge in both this case, in the January 6th case and the New York case, this being the charges stemming from a hush money payment back in 2016. In both cases, Trump himself said not guilty to the judge. In both cases, it sounded almost exactly the same. There wasn't a lot of emotion in it. It was very slow, pretty monotone of the former president simply and slowly saying not guilty. So he certainly had a very similar demeanor, not saying a whole lot and just kind of listening to the judge as the procedure went through. But I will say, in terms of the atmosphere surrounding the proceeding itself, it did feel different. I think in some respects, when we were in New York, that was the first time that Trump was being arraigned. Now we're talking about a third time. There's potentially one more coming. So certainly we have at this point now seen this before. And also it's the fact that, this one was happening in DC, where all of these law enforcement agencies who are protecting the site, they're used to this sort of thing. They deal with public demonstrations and protests and high-level VIPs all the time. So certainly in those respects, in terms of the atmosphere, it did feel a little bit different.
All right, Zach Schonfeld, staff writer covering courts and politics for our media partners at The Hill. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you.